Hey everyone, Cyber CDH here. Hope you're doing really good. Today we are going to talk about phishing. We are going to get right into the ribs of phishing. We've got lots to cover today. We're going to talk about and showcase some of the tricks, the tools, the tactics that bad guys are using to trick us into giving up our data, our privacy, our information. Also, I'm going to show you some top tips that you can use to have high confidence that emails you're opening are in fact legitimate. Also, going to get into how you can investigate phishing emails as well. If you want to dive deeper into what's behind a phishing attack, talk to you about the tools that you need, the setup you need to have a look at this kind of infrastructure as well. And also, we are going to get right into the ribs of some code, the source code behind a phishing attack as well. We're going to find out who the bad guys are. Also, we're going to find out who some of the victims are as well. This video is sponsored by Malwarebytes Privacy, and I'm super excited they've sponsored this video because it's an amazing product that will help protect you and help protect your privacy when you're browsing online. Malwarebytes Privacy is a VPN, and it lets you take control of your privacy. We're all working from home a little bit more right now. We're all spending a bit more time on the internet. Bad guys, they continue to develop their attacks, and using a VPN, it's a great way to protect your privacy online, secure your internet connection, and also prevent against unauthorized tracking. But there's tons of VPNs on the market, so why would you use Malwarebytes Privacy? Well, firstly, the Malwarebytes Privacy VPN app is really, really quick. Some VPNs that you use can be laggy and slow when you connect to the servers, but Malwarebytes Privacy uses state-of-the-art technology to give you the fastest connection around. So you can be sure that when you connect to a server, you're getting a super fast, super secure connection. Also, privacy is absolutely at the forefront of the product, right? It's in its name, Malwarebytes Privacy. It does not log any of your data, whether that's DNS requests, your web history, your bandwidth, your activity, nothing. It doesn't log any of that information. And TechRadar are actually saying this could be one of the most secure VPNs on the market, and I would agree with them. Also, you can get Malwarebytes Privacy bundled with the Malwarebytes Device Security app, and that's designed to protect up to 5 of your devices under a single license against malware, phishing, and that includes ransomware as well. Listen, I know how hard it can be to decide whether to trust a link in an email or an attachment. Do you click the link? Do you open the file? Well, one click really can lead to a bit of disaster. So Malwarebytes really gives you the confidence to browse the internet securely, protect your devices, and guess what? It's super cost effective as well. 5 devices, 1 license. You can protect all of your devices. You can protect your family as well. So check out the link in the description to this video for more information on how you can secure your privacy. Right, let's get down and dirty with some phishing. We're going to dive into some code, some emails, some phishing websites. Let's dive right in. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a few examples now of real and both fake emails, and we're going to look at some key ways that you can spot the difference between them. So this is an example of a phishing email that I received recently, and you can see that it looks like it's coming from Apple. There's a lot of urgency in this email, and the language the bad guys are using is very, very deliberate. They kind of make me feel like I've done something wrong, and I need to click on the link in their email, and I need to respond. You can see here within 12 hours of this email. And if you're anything like me, I probably don't read an email within 12 hours of it being received. So my iCloud ID has been locked. I need to respond. My account will be suspended. All kind of natural language processing techniques that the bad guys use here to make me click on this link. And we can see that if you were to use this on your phone and have a look in your inbox, you would see that it's come from what looks like Apple ID. But if you expand out and see the sender, you can see that the sender's address is obviously not from apple.com. And then also as well, take note of this logo. We have the letter A here. And if the sender name was like Colin, the letter would be C. It just takes the first initial of the sender name. And in this case, they've used Apple ID because they want to make it look like Apple. And so you have an A, and that kind of makes you feel like maybe it's come from Apple. But actually, we'll see in just a second that that's not the case. So let's take a look here at a real example of an Apple email. So this has come from email.apple.com, a genuine Apple domain, and you can't spoof this. Unless you're coming from an Apple server, you can't send emails from this domain. So if you see an email which has come from apple.com, you know that it's genuine. But coupled with that as well, has this Apple logo. And this is called BIMI, Brand Identified Mail Indicator. And so companies have to go through a lot of technical hoops to get this logo, which needs to be trademarked, and they need to prove that they own this. The domain that they're sending their email from is associated to the logo itself. You see an email from one of the big providers with this logo, an Amazon, a Facebook, a Apple, etc., then you have high confidence this is a genuine email. And I've blanked out my personal information here, but we can see this looks like an Apple email, something that I would expect, something that I've bought, and I'm expecting it. There's no urgency here. It's not asking me to do anything. It's just some information. If I want to report a problem, write a review, what have you, that's fine, all well and good, but there's nothing to say that I need to click here within any space of time. Also, as well, I can kind of use my mail client to view the message source. And in this case, that's going to bring up the headers of the email. And this looks pretty complicated. And we're going to look at a tool in just a second that we can use to parse all of this information and make a bit more sense of it. But just know that you can pull out all of the forensics of the email, the IP address that was used to send the email address, and you can do your own background to validate that was, in fact, the legitimate sender. So let's take a look now. I mentioned BIMI. I mentioned this kind of logo thing that you can look at. And let's look at my mailbox here. I've got some real emails, and I've also got some fake emails in here as well. You can see at the bottom, I've got an email from Apple that has the Apple logo, and it's my invoice. I blanked out again my personal information, but that's fine, right? I have high confidence that that is a genuine Apple email. You can see a few above it, iCloud ID, and also I have this Apple ID one as well with the letter A. I don't have the logo displayed. High confidence that this is a phish and it's not a legitimate email, and also has urgency, has this kind of sense that I need to react, to do something, to click something, to give my information. And that just isn't right. Also as well, you can see Amazon right at the top. They've got their logo. High confidence that this is a legitimate email from Amazon. And the more companies embrace BIMI, it will definitely make it easier for end users to have this kind of confidence scale as to whether an email is legitimate or not. And it's great to see that some of the big players here, the Amazons, the Apples, and the Facebooks, the Netflix of the world, are really kind of taking this on board. So there you go. There's a few examples there. Let's dive in and let's have a look at some email headers. Let's see how we can analyze them in a bit more detail. Okay, so before we dive into the email header side of things, let's quickly talk about a concept called DMARC. DMARC is all about the policy for what to do should an email that you receive fail certain checks. Now, your mail server, when you receive an email, will do a couple of checks to try and evaluate whether or not the email is legitimate or not. And a couple of those checks are, firstly, it will look at what's called a sender policy framework, an SPF record for the email domain that the email is purporting to be from. And it will look to see what IP address the email was sent from and look up in a list, a sender policy, like a list of IP addresses that are allowed to send emails on behalf of that domain. And if the IP address does not exist, then that check will fail. Secondly, there's also a check called DKIM, which stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail. And that is all about having a cryptographic rubber stamp on an email to make sure that the integrity when it's sent from server A to your server B is in fact legitimate. And if that passes that check, again, then it gives it the email a degree of credibility. Now, if both of those checks pass, then you can have a high degree of confidence that this email is going to be legitimate. And if both of those checks fail, one of them failing is okay. But if both of those checks fail, then what will happen is your mail server, Gmail, Yahoo, whoever you're with, will do a lookup for the email domain that the email looks like it's being sent from. And it will look to them and say, hey, I've got this email that's failed both of these checks. What do you want me to do? And that question, the answer to that question, is published in what's called a DMARC record. And we can see here, we saw an email earlier from email.apple.com, and we can see that the policy that Apple advertise is to say reject that message. If you get an email which fails both of those checks, then reject that message, and then Gmail or Yahoo or whomever will reject. Let's take an example, and one of my favourites here to look at is the BBC here in the UK. So if we look at bbc.co.uk, they actually publish a non-policy, which is a bit weird. And so what that means is if an email is sent to you that looks like it comes from bbc.co.uk, well, if it fails both of those checks, your mail server will look to this DMARC record and say, hey, what do you want me to do? And the BBC just say nothing. They say, yeah, do you know what? You make your own mind up. And so you can use tools like this. There are plenty of these on the internet, these fake emailers, and you can add attachments and HTML and all the rest of it. And you can spoof an email pretty easily, especially if these email domains contain a record, a DMARC record, which is none. And so in this case, here's an example email I've just sent myself. It looks like it's from John Doe at bbc.co.uk. A bit of text as an example here. I've sent it to my cyber CDH. And so what we can actually do is have a look at the original message here, and we can see all of the headers. So let's have a look at the headers here. And what I'm going to do is use a tool called a message header analyzer, which is a Microsoft tool where you can paste in email headers, perform the analysis, and we can see here that it looked like it came from bbc.co.uk, but in fact the submitting host was emkei.cz, which is this fake mailer that I've found on the internet. And then you can see also as well who it's delivered to, who the return path is. So you can see john.doe at bbc.co.uk, etc. But then also as well, we can have a look at the result, the cryptographic result from the DKIM check and also the SPF check as well. And so all of that is based here in the headers. And we can see that unfortunately, we're able to spoof pretty easily this domain. So it's really important that big organizations have a strong DMARC policy. In this case, the likes of Netflix, your Apples, your Teslas of the world, etc., all do. But unfortunately, there are ones out there that don't, and they need to be aware. And unfortunately, that doesn't make it very easy for us as end users to determine what is a legitimate email or not. So that's what we can do to analyze headers. Great tool if you want to deep dive into where an email has actually come from and the hops between the different servers, the sending IP addresses, and all the kind of forensics that you need. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of it. Let's take a look. We've seen some emails. Let's take a look at some phishing websites. And in particular, I'm going to take a look at this particular website here, which is currently live. It's a phishing website which is imitating PayPal. So we've seen one of these emails. We click the link in the email, and this is what we'll be presented with in our browser. It looks pretty legitimate. And you can see from the domain, it starts with pay, PL, and then something or other, something. And then you've got /PayPal /shining.php. Looks legitimate. It's not the best spoof in the world, but if you were just casually kind of opening a page and you saw a few things which look like PayPal, you could easily mistake this for being legitimate. And the sign-in page is pretty real. It's got the logo, it's got the email, password, login. It looks really familiar. And you can see as well, I've got the logo in the browser, and it looks pretty decent to me. Decent effort. However, a couple of telltale signs that would give things away. Well, firstly, the astute amongst you, you'll probably notice that PayPal here in the browser, in the title, it doesn't actually end with an L, it ends with an uppercase I. And that's deliberate because the bad guys know that security tools will, if you send this to an organization, for example, will scan this kind of URL and it will scan the contents that get returned. And if it says the word PayPal, but it's not on a PayPal domain, then that'll be a red flag instantly. And so this is a kind of trick around that kind of filter. So, but again, the bad guys know that it looks pretty similar and you might easily skip over that. Let's just talk quickly about the environment I'm using here first, though, before we dive into the analysis. If we're analyzing malicious infrastructure, in this case, we don't know exactly what's on this site. So it's untrusted, and we should treat this with sheer caution. And so I'm using a virtual machine. So this is Windows 7. And so I can flick between my MacBook here and my Windows 7 machine using VMware Fusion on my Mac. You can use other tools such as Parallels, or you could use VirtualBox or whatever, QEMU, whatever you want to use. In this case, I'm using VMware Fusion. I've also got a couple of tools I'm running a browser, obviously. Secondly, I'm also running Burp Suite. Now, Burp Suite is great. This is the free edition, and you can proxy your internet traffic. And I have my virtual machine configured here to proxy the LAN through port 8080 on localhost, which is what Burp Suite naturally listens on. I don't intercept on Burp Suite. Intercept is off, and you just use the HTTP history. If you just filter everything, so make sure all of those are ticked, you will see all the web requests that your browser makes here in the Burp Suite window. So run them side by side, looks nice and easy. So we're going to look at this phishing website. So what can we tell about it? Well, first off, let me just reload it in the browser. And what we can see here is we get this GET request. We've got Burp Suite has captured the GET request for us. We can see a few things about this. Firstly, it's not secure, not served over HTTPS. It's pretty lazy, if I'm honest with you, from the bad guy side of things, but should be an absolute red flag to you. Also, the spelling mistake or the deliberate spelling mistake that I mentioned there in the title is another red flag for us. And what can we do? Well, we know there's a PayPal folder. We've got this weird looking kind of hash. We've got signin.php, and we've got a few codes here, probably just to make the URL look a bit legitimate. Now, we can also, as well as have a look at the response here, we've got the HTML response here in Burp Suite. If you wanted to, you could view the page source in your browser, and you could see all of the page source that we're about to look at as well. So here in Burp Suite, you'd notice that title, what I mentioned before, right? It says PayPal here in the title, but notice it doesn't really say PayPal. It's got these weird characters. And these are HTML entities, right? So what we could do is we can copy those out. We can flip to a Chrome window here and just paste these in. And we can actually do from HTML entity using a tool called CyberChef. And so CyberChef is great. It's got so many features built into it. In this particular case, we can convert this gobbledygook, which your browser will convert for you. And then we can see exactly what that's going to equate to in our terms, in English, plain English. In this case, PAYPA. Notice the L is not there. And if we flick back here, the L is actually this I, this capital I here that we see in our window. So that's interesting. Also, that we know the form that gets submitted. So this is an email address and a password. And when you hit login, what happens when you hit login? Well, hopefully no one is going to put their real credentials into this. I definitely advise not to. But you have the email address stored as the name EM, which is for email, probably. We also have the password stored as PS for password. And then when you hit the login form, you can see that the action of the form is to submit the information via a post request to this true.php and some parameter that's passed to it as well. So let's do that, but let's do that with obviously dummy credentials. So I'm going to say hello@world.com and then just hello world for the password. If I hit login, and hopefully we can see here, there is the post request that Burp Suite has captured for us. And that's a good record of what happens next. And we can see there's a subsequent call to this particular PHP page here, account.php. So we're gathering all of the indicators of attack here in our Burp Suite window. Okay, that's all right. That's pretty interesting. And we now know that it's a pretty simple fish. Once you enter your credentials, nothing really happens off the backside of it. But what poking around can we do? Well, firstly, what I like to do is we can see we've got a folder structure here in the URL bar. So let's traverse that to see whether or not we can find anything interesting. So just have a look and see whether if I go to this folder, no, that just redirects me. Okay, well, let me take that out. Do I go to PayPal, the root folder here? No, that just redirects me as well. And if I go to the root domain itself, well, I get just this DreamHost default page here, which obviously gives us a clue as to where the bad guys are hosting their content. Well, that's not particularly interesting either. But bad guys aren't particularly smart all of the time. And so what you can also do, because we've got this folder here, /PayPal, there's an overwhelming likelihood that the bad guys have uploaded files to this web server, a zip file, then unzip them, which has got all the rest of this HTML content. So we can just guess and say, let's just say paypal.zip. Does it exist on the web server? And in this case, bingo, we hit the lottery. So what we can actually see is the source code of this website. We've got index.php and we've got all of these files within. And now we're going to take a deep dive into the code. We can find out here who the bad guy is that's receiving the credentials. We can also find out some of the victims as well, and we can do some analysis. Okay, so now I've copied that code over that we've downloaded, and I'm looking at the files in a text editor. I'm simply using Sublime Text here. You can use any text editor of your choice. If you want to be super neat, then go for Vim. I use Sublime Text. It's nice and easy. I like the syntax highlighting. I can navigate around things quite easily. So let's get into it then. So the first page that we will go to, you can see the folder structure here, right? We have a root directory, PayPal, which is where we got paypal.zip. And then that in turn has a file index.php and also a root folder notification dash whatever as well. So let's have a look at index. That's the first one that's going to load. And so you can see here, there's a few things going on. But firstly, what sticks out to me is we have this file put contents log.txt. And so there seems to be the output of server remote address, which would be your IP address, and a date and timestamp is being logged to log.txt. Well, that's quite interesting. And that's in the root PayPal folder. So let's go back to our virtual machine here and let's try it. Let's go to log.txt. And we can see, in fact, we do have the log of victim IP addresses and the date stamps who have visited this particular website. Well, that's pretty interesting. And the bad guys will probably use this for maybe some intelligence as to see if there's an IP address that's hitting them a lot. Maybe that's a security researcher like me, and maybe they'd want to block that as well. So that's pretty cool. We can see there's a big old long list here, but from a threat intelligence point of view, it's pretty decent, right? Because we can see maybe the first time that a victim has hit this particular phishing URL. And then also as well, we can get an idea of how long this phishing site has been alive for. And then potentially as well, you might actually find that maybe the first IP address in the list may have been the bad guy testing their code themselves. And so again, that can lead you to some further threat intelligence, which is quite interesting. Okay, so that's pretty cool. We know we've got log.txt. That's awesome. Okay, and then we get a few calls here, which basically copies the source. And we have this function recurse copy, takes two parameters, source and destination. And all it's going to do is take the contents, all of this of notification dash whatever, and it's going to copy it into a randomly named folder. So we basically have copies of all of this stuff, all of the files on the web server per directory. So you can see my randomly generated number here is 5528B, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to signin.php. Okay, so, and it's just going to send you to that particular location. And the first thing that will happen is you'll go to index.php of that directory that's just been created. Here we get a couple of other PHP pages included, functions and lang.php. Take a look at them in just a second. We get some random numbers generated and some codes pulled from the session as well. And then also we have the output of a function here, which is stored in this variable, and then the location of our URL bar is going to set itself to that particular output. So we want to know what this JIBMILAF function is all about, and that exists in this functions.php. So let's have a look at that. It includes functions.php, and let's have a look. We can see here that we have a global variable login, which is defined here, and we can see that for each login in that global variable array, if the file exists, then return it with a question mark after it. And so it's going to look for authn, sign in, login, or secure.php. And if that exists in the web server directory, then it's going to hit that particular location. In this particular case, we can see that we went to signin.php. And then here, actually in the initial root directory, we can see that it's authn.php. And as a function above it, we actually just goes through a process of renaming whatever that would be, again, just to kind of fool you a little bit, but don't be put off. So let's go to authn.php. So this is what is returned currently here in the browser. So signin.php is the same as authn.php. And we can see It looks pretty messy to analyze. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but what I'm interested in is what happens when you submit the actual form itself. And we can see here that the form action is set by a variable edit curl, and that is actually stored in this particular file info.php edit curl, and that is just a string action equals true.php. So when you hit the button to submit your details, then it's going to submit the details to true.php, which is exactly what we saw in our virtual machine earlier. Also, as well, notice that we have the email address here of the bad guy who's going to receive a copy of these credentials that you submit to this form. And you can see that there's a comment saying your email, Hotmail, Gmail. This is a phishing kit, which the bad guy has probably bought somewhere on the internet, on the dark web, and he's just copy and pasted it, uploaded it to his web server, and just changed the bits of details that are relevant to him. So he gets a copy of the credentials and nobody else. And in this case, we can see new result at mail.ch. That is the malicious email address that's going to receive a copy of the credentials that are entered into this phishing website. So we can report that, right? We've now got an active indicator that we can use and do something with as well. So let's take a look at true.php. What happens when you go to true.php? So we get into the meat of it here. We can see there's a few other files included, functions again, bots.php and info. We didn't look at bots, but let's quickly do that now. And here we've got an array of IP addresses. We've also got an array of blocked words that might appear within the headers. And we can see that if you're coming to this phishing website from any of these IP addresses, you will actually be 4.0 forward. You'll actually not be able to see the malicious content. And that's because these IP ranges will belong to security vendors, security tools, etc. And so this is another method the bad guys use to try and remain undetected on the internet. Let's go back to true.php, and we can see here we've got quite a lot of other HTML here, but let's just scroll down and see if there's anything we can find that is interesting to us to further our analysis. Well, we can see right at the bottom we've got some additional PHP code. Subject, headers, and then a call to mail. And this mail, what's going to initiate the email to the bad guy, and the person who's going to receive it is stored in this variable here, and that was picked up from this file info.php. So this email address is going to get plugged in. The subject is log/IP, and then all of this HTML, which has got all of the data that's been input by the user, the headers as well, is going to be sent to the bad guy. Next, it goes to account.php. If that fails, it goes back to index. So let's have a look at account.php. Okay, again, we get some includes here. Nothing too interesting about those. We get lots of HTML as well. We go what looks to be another form. And so we need to do a little bit of analysis to see what is going on with this form. Again, all looks like HTML, but you can see there's quite a lot of variables, quite a lot of function calls, quite a lot of stuff that you would really have to spend a bit of time picking apart. But what I'm interested in, let's do a quick search for the string form, and we can see here form action. So whatever this HTML is going to produce a form. It's probably going to ask for some additional details once you've put your email address and password into the initial form, and the action of that form, it's going to submit to done.php. So let's have a look at done.php, which is this one here. And we can see we've got a variable called redi, which is the value of ic.php. And then it's going to extract from the headers of the request, the post request here, the email address and password that you've submitted. We've got a load of HTML yet again, which again is nothing too interesting about this, but we want to know what is going on with this HTML. Well, we can see here, look at this. Now we've got another email, which is going to be sent to the same email address with the subject defined here, which is a bit weird and wonderful. And then all of that HTML, so all of the additional data is then going to be sent to the bad guy as well. It looks like they then start to declare a rather large text variable, this text result unknown, which stores the first name, last name, phone, the card number, etc. But I can't find what they actually do with this. So I think this code is maybe incomplete or has been copy and pasted from somewhere else. Who knows? Not really sure, to be honest with you. So what happens when we submit that form? Well, form action equals REDI, which was stored way up in the top here as ice.z.php. Let's take a look at that. Ice.z.php is HTML again. And so we can see here that in the body of the HTML, we have this meta content URL equals recu.php, and it's going to refresh. So it's just going to automatically refresh to recu.php. Let's jump into there. We're in the rabbit hole here, and this is deliberate. The bad guys are clever. They kind of throw you off analysis, make things look tricky, make it look convoluted for you to actually go and analyze all of the badness to be able to extract everything this code is doing. And so it looks like we're in a kind of change password HTML page here. Not really sure what every single line is doing, but we've got a lot of HTML code here. We've got a lot of CSS. So stuff that you could really pick apart. But again, we've got another form here, and the action of the form is to send to snd2.php. So let's take a look at snd2.php, which is here. Now it gets a little bit more interesting again. Okay, so we've got IP address of the user, the host name. We've got a little message here as well, which is the IP of the user plus the username. And we get another email that's going to be sent to the same email address as we saw before. But then also look at this. We get this log file, sms.txt, which is being appended to, and that message is going to be appended to the text file as well. Now, the location of this text file that is in the root directory here, this notification, whatever. So let's just copy and paste this, and we'll put it into our browser here. And it was called sms.txt. Oops, I type it right, sms.txt. And here we can see, again, a list of the IP addresses and also the usernames of the potential victims of this particular phish. So again, perfect for threat intelligence. Great if you're an organization and you want to see whether any of your users have been compromised by this particular phishing kit. Being able to poke around the actual source code like we've just done now. We've done it super quick. We've flown through it. We haven't looked at everything. There is definitely more to analyze in this particular phishing kit. But you can see there's a combination of methods that we've used to extract key indicators. We've got the bad guy's email address that's going to receive a copy of all of the compromised information. And we can also see some of that information ourselves by looking at the web server log files that are written by this particular code as well. Okay, thank you for sticking with me. We've taken a look at a lot today, right? We've looked at how you can spot malicious emails in the mailbox, and also how you can have confidence that the emails you're looking at are in fact legitimate as well. We've dived into what you can do to look at email headers to further your analysis, talked about DMARC, and as well we've got down and dirty with some phishing website analysis as well. And we've poked around a bit, and lo and behold, we've managed to get ourselves the source code of the phishing kit as well that we've looked at. Managed to identify the bad guy, and also managed to identify potential victim data too. It's really important when you do this kind of analysis that you use a VPN. It's also really important that you have device security as well. You can get both solutions from Malwarebytes, and I really thank them for sponsoring this video. I really believe in their products, and you should definitely take a look at the link in the description to this video, and you can learn more about how you can protect yourself on the internet, remain secure, protect your privacy, protect against phishing and malware as well, and stay safe online. Thanks very much for joining me today. Take it easy. I look forward to your questions and comments. You can also follow me on Twitter @CyberCDH. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more content, please subscribe as well. And I really look forward to seeing you soon.